Section 14. Unauthorized activity. Arizona Commissioner's Standards. Requirements for licensees. Introduction. The line. You don't want to cross. Jessica used to think violations only happened to bad agents, the ones cutting corners, misleading clients, or doing shady deals. But as she grew in her career, she realized something different. Most violations don't start with bad intentions. They start with small decisions, answering a question outside your expertise, taking a shortcut on disclosure, helping someone just this one time, and before you know it, you've crossed into unauthorized activity. This section is about understanding where that line is and making sure you never cross it. Fiduciary duty and reasonable care. The foundation. A licensee is a real estate professional with a fiduciary duty to act in the client's best interests. This duty requires not just loyalty, but competence and reasonable care under AAC R4 28-11-01I. That means if something is outside your expertise, you don't guess. You recommend that your client seek professional advice. For example, if a client asks about tax implications of a transaction, the correct response is not to provide a detailed answer unless you are qualified to do so. The correct response is to recommend a tax professional. Another example is when a client asks about structural issues in a home. An agent should not attempt to diagnose the problem, but should recommend a licensed inspector or contractor. Jessica realized that saying, "I don't know, but I'll get you the right expert," is not weakness. It is professional compliance. Verifying information. Trust but verify. Licensees are expected to take reasonable steps to help clients confirm or verify information, especially when something doesn't seem accurate. If a seller says the roof is new, but the agent sees visible wear, that should raise a question. If square footage seems inconsistent with public records, it should be verified. A reasonably prudent agent does not blindly pass along information. They question it when necessary. Jessica once had a listing where the seller insisted the property was on city sewer. Something didn't feel right. She verified it and discovered it was actually on septic. That verification protected her client and her license. When negligence becomes a violation, these standards are not just guidelines, they are enforceable. If a licensee fails to act with reasonable care, fails to verify information, or provides services beyond their competence, it can lead to disciplinary action. The law does not require perfection, but it does require professional judgment. Jessica learned that most violations don't come from intentional misconduct. They come from carelessness. Grounds for disciplinary action. What gets agents in trouble? The Commissioner has broad authority to discipline licensees. This can include suspending or revoking a license, denying a license application, issuing a letter of concern, or denying renewal. One of the most serious issues is misrepresentation. This includes making false promises or presenting information that is not accurate, whether directly or through someone else. Another major violation is representing more than one party in a transaction without the knowledge and consent of all parties. This goes directly against fiduciary duty and transparency requirements. Violating any statutes or rules adopted by the Commissioner can also result in discipline. This includes advertising violations, disclosure failures, and improper handling of transactions. Jessica realized that compliance isn't about avoiding one big mistake. It's about avoiding a series of small ones that add up. Misleading advertising and false statements. A licensee cannot knowingly authorize or participate in the distribution of false or misleading information. For example, approving a marketing flyer that exaggerates property features, allowing incorrect MLS data to remain uncorrected, or sharing misleading social media content can all create liability. Even if someone else creates the content, if a licensee approves or distributes it, they can still be responsible. Jessica started reviewing everything more carefully, not just what she created, but what she shared. Unlicensed activity, a major risk area. One of the clearest violations is employing or working with unlicensed individuals to perform activities that require a license. For example, allowing an unlicensed assistant to show property, discuss contract terms, or negotiate on behalf of a client is a violation. Another example is paying an unlicensed person for performing licensed activity. Arizona law strictly separates licensed and unlicensed roles, and crossing that line can lead to serious consequences. Compensation violations. Follow the money. A licensee cannot accept compensation for real estate activity from anyone other than their employing broker. This means no direct payments from clients, no side deals, and no bypassing the brokerage. For example, if an agent helps a friend buy a property and accepts a thank you payment directly, that could be a violation. All compensation must flow through the brokerage structure to ensure proper supervision and accountability. Jessica realized that money is one of the fastest ways to create compliance issues if not handled correctly. Working for the wrong broker. A licensee can only represent the broker they are currently licensed under. This means if an agent moves brokerages, they cannot continue working on transactions for the previous broker. Even if the client relationship is strong, the legal relationship is with the brokerage, not the individual agent. Jessica saw this happen in her office when an agent switched brokerages mid-transaction and tried to stay involved. It created confusion, delays, and potential violations. Handling client funds and documents. A licensee must account for and properly handle all money and documents belonging to others. Failing to remit funds, delaying delivery of documents, or mishandling client property can all lead to disciplinary action. For example, holding earnest money longer than required, failing to deliver signed documents promptly, or losing important paperwork can create serious issues. This is where organization and systems become critical. Bringing it all together. Professionalism is protection. Unauthorized activity is not always obvious. It often starts with small decisions that seem harmless in the moment. Answering a question outside your expertise. Skipping a verification step. Letting an assistant do just a little more. Accepting payment outside the brokerage. Each of these can lead to bigger problems if not handled correctly. Jessica realized that the best way to protect her career was to follow one simple rule. If you're unsure, stop and check, because in Arizona real estate, staying within your lane isn't limiting. It's what keeps your license safe. Online discussion. 1. Why is it important for a licensee to recommend outside professionals instead of answering questions outside their expertise? Answer. Because providing advice outside of one's expertise can lead to incorrect information, liability, and violations of professional standards, while recommending experts protects both the client and the licensee. 2. What is the biggest risk of failing to verify information in a transaction? Answer. The biggest risk is passing along inaccurate information, which can lead to misrepresentation, client harm, and disciplinary action. 3. Why must all compensation flow through the brokerage? Answer. To ensure proper supervision, accountability, and compliance with Arizona law, preventing unauthorized or unregulated real estate activity.